Hello, I am Rajesh Verma, an assistant professor of English at Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, Kamachha, affiliated to Banaras Hindu University. Today I shall talk about modernism and English literature and how modernism has affected the 20th century literature. Modernism may be seen as a literary movement spanning the period from the last quarter of the 19th century in France and from 1890 in Great Britain and Germany to the start of the Second World War. This is how the Oxford Companion to English Literature defines modernism. But then, modernism as a movement arose out of certain preconditions. It has certain characteristics, it has certain features that we shall look upon in this lecture. Basically, if we talk about modernism, it is characterized by a deliberate and often radical shift away from tradition. I mean, modernism tries to reject the past or the traditional past that was being proposed in the 19th and you can say 18th century. It tries to differentiate itself from the traditional mode of narratives by using certain forms of expression that is also known as avant-garde. But what was the need of modernism? Why did it exist as a movement? There were certain social and political backgrounds to it, and these social and political backgrounds highlighted the importance of the idea of modernity that was being proposed and propounded by the theory of enlightenment. If we look at the social features of the age, then we find that Queen Victoria's reign has come to an end in 1901, and in the field of technology, the Ford motors, they were establishing themselves. Einstein comes to the scene and propounds his theory of special relativity, and more than that, we find a world war on a mass scale, a violence on a mass scale coming to this world. And then Britain was going through certain internal disturbances like Easter Rising in Dublin, and then we find great effort by the humanity in the form of the establishment of League of Nations. Again, Hitler comes to the power, then there is a Second World War, atomic bombs are dropped on Japan, and then again there is a hope in the form of an Apollo lands on the moon. But did they give any kind of certainty to us? What the Enlightenment people were talking about, that man as a rational being can apprehend and understand this natural phenomena. Man was looked as an all-knowing, powerful creator next to God, or even sometimes challenging the idea of God. So, modernism tries to study all these things, all these phenomena of 18th and 19th century, where man is seen as something who can replace the authority of God, and that's why Nietzsche, in the form of irony and satire, says that God is dead. So modernism tries to take an example from such things, where people like Nietzsche and Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, they are trying to inform us of our limitations and importance. For example, Charles Darwin in the field of biology gives us a new kind of theory where human beings who were earlier taken by certain great books like Bible as the incarnation of God on earth, and fallen angels could become uplifted angels, but then he proved that we are driven by the same impulses as lower animals are, and this proved difficult to reconcile with the idea of ennobling spirituality. In the field of economics, and not only economics but even in sociology, Karl Marx has done a lot. He has presented us a political a vision of the same proposition which Darwin has tried to do in the field of biology, that the problems with the economic order were not transient. The result of specific wrongdoers or temporary conditions were responsible for that, and that there is a fundamental contradiction within the capitalist system. The capitalist system, which was supposed to be an emancipatory kind of economic system when it was trying to be popularized in this world. And then in the field of psychology, Sigmund Freud comes and informs us that we as a human being are not as rational as we all have thought of, and this mind through which we experience these experiences are not objective but subjective experiences which are based on the interplay of the parts of the mind. And all subjective reality, they are based on the play of basic drives, instincts through which we all try to perceive the outside world. And this means gave us a kind of impetus that we must break with the past, and a past which believed in the external and absolute reality. So, as far as literary fields were concerned, symbolism came as a movement in which the traditional mode of expressions were being questioned. Symbolism tried to inform about the incapacity of language as an expression or as a mode of expression. He said, we all know that symbolism tried to inform us that language is expressly symbolic in its nature. Arthur Symons, who proposed this idea of symbolism, and he has written a great book, The Symbolist Movement in Literature, he says, symbolism in literature is a form of expression, at the best, but approximate, essentially, but arbitrary, for an unseen reality apprehended by the consciousness. So, if language cannot adequately describe a thing or feeling or thought, a symbol may be able to evoke it obliquely. And Stephen Mallarmé, the representative poet, has used this technique very well. And the other poets who found out that traditional mode of expression incapable of giving real expression to the demands of the age, and they tried to experiment with the narrative techniques. T.S. Eliot tries to experiment with the mode of expression in his great epic poem The Wasteland, where he used the free verse technique, which is also known as verse libre. Verse which departs from regular patterns of rhythm and rhyme is what you can or we can call free verse. The modernist poets who wanted to abandon the artificial and ornamental in verse argued that free verse enabled them to write poetry whose rhythms were closer to the patterns of speech. In the field of novel, stream of consciousness technique was adopted, a technique which was earlier invented or coined by William James in his book Principles of Psychology. It was a technique in which the individual's point of view was given an importance. The novelist tries to look into the past, the present, the future at the same time, thus rejecting the idea of chronological narration. This technique was characterized by associative leaps in syntax and punctuation, and interior monologue is distinguished from dramatic monologue, in which the speaker addresses to himself or to his own mind. And the Enlightenment, which focused upon the individual, also rejected the idea of meta-narrative, but then people like T.S. Eliot tried to highlight this kind of description and narration through the experimental technique in which they borrowed from other cultures also. Modernist literature has certain characteristics like open and experimental form, discontinuity, juxtaposition, intertextuality, classical allusions. It moves away from the bondage of realist literature. It introduces concepts such as disjointed timelines. It is distinguished by emancipatory meta-narrative. It moves away from romanticism, and the examples are the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, The Wasteland in the field of poetry, and Ulysses in the field of drama. And the common motif in modernist fiction has been the alienated individual. There is no hero, there is no central plot, central story, and there is a concern for larger factors such as social or historical change. Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway is one of the examples for that. Social norms and cultural sureties are broken down. There is a dislocation of meaning and sense from its normal context. There is a rejection of history, and mythical past is rather highlighted. So, alienation of the individual and the artist, society as fractured and culture as fragment are highlighted. There are questionings of the value of cultural norms. So, this is how we look at it, because ultimately it was a literature of the urban phenomena in which city becomes the center, but in an ironical manner. There is a disillusionment which arises from the sense of discovery. Something which means which was earlier anticipated comes out not to be. I will end my lecture here by the conclusion of James Joyce, by a statement of James Joyce from A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I will not serve that in which I no longer believe, whether it call itself home, my fatherland, or my church, and I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning. Thank you very much.